At my mother's funeral, when everyone left the church, my own father attacked me behind the altar. What he didn't realize was that the ceremony microphone was still on. The priest heard everything, and that day changed our lives forever. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my dears. How are you all doing? I hope you're well, healthy, and with peace in your hearts. I'm Margaret Maggie Sullivan, but everyone calls me Grandma Maggie. I'm 79 years old now, thank God, and I live here in Oakfield, a small town in upstate New York. I was born in Pine Creek, Pennsylvania, but life brought me here many years ago, and I've put down roots that I've never been able to pull up. I'm sitting here in my kitchen, where I spend most of my time. Look at this old wooden table that belonged to my mother-in-law, covered with a lace tablecloth I made myself. The walls are yellow, the color of sunshine, because I've always liked bright, cheerful spaces. On the windowsill, I have my little plants, basil, mint, rosemary, that I use to season my cooking and also to make my herbal teas. The smell of fresh herbs always brings me peace. These days, besides taking care of the house and welcoming my 5 grandchildren who come to visit almost every weekend, I bake cakes and cookies to order. I started by chance, you know. After my husband Harold, God rest his soul, passed away 12 years ago, I needed to keep my mind and hands busy. I always loved cooking, ever since I was a little girl helping my mother, and one day I made a cornbread with apple butter for my granddaughter Claire's birthday. The other children's parents liked it so much that they started asking me for recipes and then placing orders. At first, I only baked for people I knew, but then my grandson Tyler helped me create a page on the internet. Can you imagine a lady my age with pages on Facebook and Instagram? He takes pictures of my baked goods and posts them with nice captions. Now I have orders almost every week, especially for my lemon squares, which are my specialty, and cornbread, which they say is the best in town. I don't make much money from this, but enough to buy my ingredients and still give little presents to my grandchildren when they come to visit. And most importantly, it keeps me active and makes me feel useful, you know? At my age, you need a purpose to get out of bed every day. And you, my dears, who are watching me now, tell me in the comments, which town are you watching from? And what time of day did you find this grandma? Are you having your morning coffee? Or is it lunchtime? Or perhaps in the peaceful evening hours? I always read everything you write, and I'm so happy to know that I have friends from so many different places. Tell me, okay? Let's form a chain of affection between this grandma and all of you. But today, I didn't come just to talk about my baking and my daily life. I want to share with you a story that I've carried inside for many years. A difficult story that for a long time I couldn't even tell myself. It was so painful. But time, my dears, is a powerful medicine. And today I feel that I can talk about it, because it might help someone who is going through something similar. It's a story that begins way back in my childhood in Pennsylvania, when the world seemed so big and at the same time so small for a girl like me. Those were difficult times, but they taught me a lot about life and about the strength that we don't even imagine we have within us. It was there in Pine Creek, a small and simple town where I was born and raised, that everything began. In those days, the town was very different from what it is today, you know? The dirt roads, the simple houses, the church in the center of the square, and everyone knew everyone else. It was a place where secrets spread quickly like creek water, but some managed to stay hidden behind the closed doors of homes. Oh, my dears, just remembering those times in Pine Creek makes my heart tight. It was a small town in rural Pennsylvania where everyone knew each other. Our house was on Maple Street, a simple wooden house painted light blue with a large backyard full of fruit trees. We had cherry trees, apple trees, peach trees, and a garden in front that my mother, Eleanor, tended with such care. My father, Arthur Sullivan, worked at the town's sawmill. He was a tall, strong man of few words. He had a thick mustache and hands that were always rough, calloused from heavy work. He would leave early before the sun came up and return when it was already getting dark. On Saturday nights, he would stop at Mr. Armstrong's Tavern before coming home, and on those nights we knew it was better to keep quiet, because he came home angry, smelling of whiskey. My mother was his opposite. Short, thin. She spoke softly and had a sweet smile, even when life was difficult. She worked as a laundress, washing clothes for the more affluent families in town. She would wake up with my father and go to the wash basins, which were in the back of the yard, under a large oak tree. There she would scrub, beat, and wring the clothes, always humming the same old song she had learned from her grandmother. We were 5 siblings. I was the middle child. My older siblings were Benjamin and Lucy. The younger ones were Gerald and Ivan. Benjamin, the oldest, started working with Dad at the sawmill when he was 12. Lucy helped Mom with the clothes and took care of the house. I was responsible for the younger ones, Gerald and Ivan. Life was simple, but we didn't go hungry, thank God. Mom always found a way. She planted potatoes, squash, corn, and beans in our backyard. She raised some chickens that gave us fresh eggs every day, and when she killed a chicken, it was a celebration. She would make that thick broth, well seasoned with garlic, onion, and herbs that she grew herself. Our routine began early. At 5 in the morning, Mom was already up, lighting the wood stove to make coffee. The smell of freshly brewed coffee was our alarm clock. We would get up, wash our faces in the enamel basin that sat on a bench in the yard, and go have breakfast. A mug of coffee with milk and a piece of homemade bread or cornbread. After that, everyone went to their duties. My siblings and I went to school, which was about a 20-minute walk from our house. The school was a wooden building with only 3 rooms. Miss Leonard was the teacher for all the children, dividing the classroom among the different grades. I remember she was quite strict, hitting the desk with a ruler when we made noise, but she was also affectionate when she saw that we were trying hard. When we returned from school, around noon, we all had lunch together. Mom insisted on this, saying it was the time for the family to be together. The food was simple but tasty. Potatoes, beans, a little extra that could be fried eggs, sausage when we had it, or just sautéed squash. And there was always cornmeal to give it substance. After lunch, I helped wash the dishes and went to take care of my younger brothers. We played in the yard, under the trees. We played tag, hide and seek, jacks, hopscotch. With what we had at hand, we invented fun. We made dolls from corn husks, wooden cars, tops from bottle caps. Ivan, my youngest brother, loved climbing trees. His knees were always scraped from falling so much. We had some neighbor friends who came to play with us. Dorothy, Mrs. Olson's daughter, was my best friend. We played house under the mulberry tree, using leaves as money to buy and sell imaginary things. Jeremy, the son of Mr. Adams the cobbler, always brought his slingshot, and we would try to hit empty cans that we placed on the wall. In our town, the festivals were the most anticipated moments. The 4th of July celebration was the biggest of all. There were parades, picnics, music, and dancing. Mom made sure to dress us as best she could, even in simple clothes. Dad, on festival days, seemed like a different person. He smiled, talked with his friends, even danced with Mom sometimes. But not everything was rosy. Around the time I was 8, I began to notice that things at home weren't going as well as they seemed. Dad started drinking more, not just on Saturdays. Sometimes he came home in the middle of the week smelling of whiskey, talking loudly, complaining about everything. Mom tried to calm him down, told us to go to our room, but even from there, we could hear his shouts and her crying. Once, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of things breaking. When I left my room, I saw Mom on the kitchen floor, her face stained with blood, and Dad standing, holding a broken bottle. He saw me and yelled for me to go back to bed. I ran, frightened, and hid under the covers, trembling. The next day, Mom appeared with a bandage on her face and said she had slipped and fallen. But I knew the truth. After that day, things only got worse. Dad lost his job at the sawmill, found another job, lost it again. Money became tighter. Mom had to take in more laundry. Her arms would get red from the soap and cold water, and she coughed a lot, especially on damp winter mornings. It was during this time that I began to notice the strange looks Dad gave me. I was 10 years old, starting to become a young lady, as Mom said. One day, he called me to help him get something from the shed out back. When we went in, he closed the door and tried to touch me in a way that scared me. I managed to escape because Mom called for me at that exact moment. I told Mom in tears. She turned white as paper, hugged me tight, and said, "Always stay close to me or Lucy, my child. Never be alone with your father." From then on, she protected me like a lioness. When Dad arrived, she would invent some task to keep me busy beside her. Time passed, and when I was 12 years old, Mom started getting sick. First, it was just a cough that wouldn't go away. Then came the weakness, the shortness of breath. The town doctor, Dr. Wallace, said it was a lung problem, that she needed treatment in the city. But we didn't have money for that. She wasted away slowly, getting thinner and paler each day. She continued working almost until the end, even when she could barely stand at the wash basin. One day, she couldn't get out of bed. A week later, on a cold June dawn, Mom was gone. I remember the silence that took over the house that morning, a silence that seemed to swallow everything. And I knew at that moment that my life would never be the same. My mother's wake was held in our house, as was customary in Pine Creek at that time. They placed the coffin in the living room, arranged some chairs around it, and people from town came to pay their last respects to Eleanor, who was much loved by everyone. The women brought cakes, breads, and coffee for those keeping vigil. The men talked in low voices in the yard, some smoking their hand-rolled cigarettes. My father received many condolences, but he seemed distant, as if he were somewhere else. He drank all night, in secret. I saw when he would go out to the yard and come back with the strong smell of whiskey on his breath. My siblings were devastated. Benjamin, at 17, tried to be strong, but his eyes were red from crying so much. Lucy, at 15, wouldn't leave the coffin, holding our mother's cold hand. The little ones, Gerald at 9 and Ivan at 7, didn't really understand what was happening, but they felt the sadness in the air. Me? I was in shock. At 12 years old, losing a mother seemed like the end of the world. And it was, in a way. Because she wasn't just my mother. She was my protector, my shield against the evils of the world, especially against my own father. The next day, it was time for the burial. First Baptist Church in the center of town received my mother's body for the funeral service. It was an old church made of wood with a simple but beautiful altar, all hand-carved by local craftsmen. The dark wooden pews were all occupied. It seemed like the entire town had come to say goodbye to my mother. It was on that day that Pastor Anderson used the church's sound system for the first time. It was quite a novelty for our small Pine Creek in 1958. The parish had received a donation of a microphone and some speakers from a wealthy family from Pittsburgh who had a farm in the region. No one in town was used to it yet. "We are gathered here to say farewell to our sister, Eleanor Sullivan." Pastor Anderson's voice echoed through the church in a way we had never heard before, startling some small children. It was strange to hear his voice so loud, seeming to come from all corners at once. During the ceremony, I sat between Lucy and Benjamin in the first row. Dad was next to Benjamin, with the little ones. He couldn't sit still, fidgeting on the bench all the time, running his hands over his face, his hair. I could smell the whiskey even from a distance. The service ended, and the coffin was taken to the cemetery behind the church. After the burial, people began to disperse. Some came to hug us, offer words of comfort, offer help. Mrs. Genevieve, a neighbor of many years, said she would take the little boys to her house to rest and eat something. Benjamin went to accompany an uncle to the bus station. Lucy went with her godmother, Mrs. Hortense, to get some clothes that had been left in the church, used for the altar arrangement, and I was left alone in the church, sitting on a bench, unable to get up. My legs felt like they were made of lead. I looked at the altar and couldn't believe I would never see my mother again. Tears silently rolled down my face. I didn't notice when the church emptied completely. I didn't see when the sexton, Mr. Gentile, left to accompany Pastor Anderson to the parsonage. I didn't notice when my father returned and sat down beside me on the bench. "Margaret," he said, his voice slurred, "let's go home." I didn't answer. I couldn't look at him. "Your mother is dead," he continued. "Now I'm in charge of everything. Just me." I felt a shiver run down my spine. The tone of his voice was different, threatening. I raised my eyes and saw that he was staring at me in a way that frightened me. "I want to go with Lucy," I managed to say. "Your sister isn't coming back today. She's staying at her godmother's house," he replied, coming closer. "It's just you and me now." The smell of whiskey was so strong, it made me nauseous. I tried to move away, but he grabbed my arm tightly. "Dad, you're hurting me," I said, trying to free myself. "You look just like your mother when she was your age," he muttered, running his other hand over my face. "Just like her." At that moment, I understood what was about to happen. The same thing he had tried years before in the shed when Mom saved me. But now, Mom was no longer there. No one was. "Dad, please," I begged, tears coming back forcefully. "Let's go. Everyone is waiting." "No one is waiting," he replied, and his smile chilled me to the soul. "I've sent everyone away." He pulled me behind the altar, where there was a small vestry. I tried to resist, but he was much stronger. I tried to scream, but he covered my mouth with his calloused hand, which smelled of cigarettes and whiskey. "If you scream, I'll beat you until you pass out," he threatened, his eyes injected with a malice I had never seen before. "No one will hear anyway. Everyone is still at the cemetery or has gone home." In the vestry, he pushed me against the wall. I hit my back hard and let out a moan of pain. He approached, blocking any chance of escape. "Your place is with me now. I'll teach you to be a woman," he said, beginning to unbuckle his belt. That's when I heard a strange noise, a click, and then my father's voice echoed through the empty church. "Your place is with me now. I'll teach you to be a woman." We both froze. My father looked around, confused. His voice had come out through the church's speakers. And then I understood. The microphone that Pastor Anderson had used during the service was still on. It was there, on a table near the altar, and it had picked up what my father had said. For a second, I saw the panic in his eyes. He let go of my arm and moved back a little, looking at the vestry door, as if expecting someone to enter at any moment. That's when I heard another voice. "Is anyone still there?" It was Pastor Anderson. He had come back to turn off the sound system. "Help! Pastor, help!" I screamed with all the strength I could gather. My father tried to silence me, but I dodged. I ran to the vestry door, to the altar, away from him. Pastor Anderson appeared at the side door of the church, confused. When he saw me running, with my face red from tears, and my father coming after me with his belt in his hand, he quickly understood that something was very wrong. "What's happening here?" he asked, his voice firm and authoritative. He was going to—" I couldn't complete the sentence, sobbing. My father stopped, seeing the pastor. He tried to compose himself, putting his belt back on. "It's nothing, Pastor. The girl is upset because of her mother," he said, trying to appear normal. "Let's go home, Margaret," he ordered, extending his hand to me. I cowered behind Pastor Anderson, trembling. "Arthur, I think you need to calm down," the pastor said seriously. "I just heard what you said to your daughter. The microphone was still on." My father turned pale. He looked at the microphone on the table, then at the pastor, then at me. "I don't know what you're talking about, Pastor." He tried to defend himself, but his voice trembled. "I know exactly what I'm talking about," the pastor replied severely. "And I think it's better for you to go home now, alone. Margaret will stay at the parsonage tonight." "She's my daughter," my father protested, anger growing in his voice. "And she's under the church's protection now," the pastor replied, not backing down. "Go home, Arthur. Tomorrow we'll talk with Sheriff Eureka about this." At the mention of the sheriff, my father took a step back. He looked at me with hatred, then at the pastor. "This isn't over," he threatened, before turning his back and leaving the church, staggering. When he left, my legs gave way. I fell to my knees, trembling and crying. Pastor Anderson knelt beside me, placed his hand on my shoulder. "Everything is all right now, my child," he said gently. "He won't hurt you. I won't allow it." At that moment, sitting on the cold floor of the church, looking at the altar where my mother's coffin had been hours before, I knew that nothing would be the same again. In a single day, I lost my mother and discovered that my father was a monster. But, because of a microphone that someone forgot to turn off, I had been saved from a terrible fate. "Come, my child," Pastor Anderson said, helping me to get up. "Mrs. Genevieve will take care of you and your siblings for now. Tomorrow we'll solve this." We left the church for the cold night in Pine Creek. The stars shone in the dark sky, indifferent to the drama that had just happened. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew that something had changed forever that day. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed at Mrs. Genevieve's house, along with my younger brothers. Gerald and Ivan slept peacefully, not understanding the gravity of what had happened. Benjamin arrived later, and, when he learned what had occurred, he was furious. He wanted to go confront our father, but Mrs. Genevieve convinced him to wait until the next day, when the sheriff would be present. "It will be worse if you go there alone, my son," she said, holding Benjamin's arm. "Your father is drunk and violent. Let justice solve this." Lucy arrived the next morning, brought by her godmother. When we hugged, we cried together. I told her in whispers what had happened in the church. She turned pale, then red with anger. "I always suspected," she murmured, "by the way he looked at you. Mom knew too. That's why she never left you alone with him." The news of what happened in the church spread quickly through the small town. Before noon, everyone in Pine Creek knew that Arthur Sullivan had tried to abuse his own daughter on the day of his wife's burial, and that the church microphone had caught everything. Sheriff Richards came to visit us at Mrs. Genevieve's house. He was a tall man, with a graying mustache and a severe look. He sat with me in the kitchen, while Mrs. Genevieve stayed by my side, holding my hand. "I need you to tell me exactly what happened, Margaret," he said, taking a small notebook from his pocket. "I know it's difficult, but I need to know everything to be able to help you and your siblings." With great effort and several pauses to regain courage, I told everything. From the first attempts by my father years before to what happened in the church. The sheriff noted everything down, asking occasional questions, but always with respect and care. When I finished, he closed his notebook and looked at me with compassion. "You're very brave, girl," he said. "I'll take all necessary measures. Your father will answer for what he did." He stood up and called Benjamin, who was in the living room with the others. They talked in low voices for a few minutes. "I'm going to arrest your father right now," I heard the sheriff say, "but we need to think about what will happen to the 5 of you." That's when the real difficulty began. We were 5 siblings without father or mother. Benjamin, even at 17, couldn't legally take care of us. We had no close relatives in Pine Creek. What would become of us? That same afternoon, Sheriff Richards and 2 more deputies went to our house and arrested my father. They said he resisted, broke furniture, tried to escape through the back, but ended up being captured. He was taken to the town jail, where he would stay until being transferred to the larger prison in Williamsport. The following days were a whirlwind. We couldn't go back to our house. We didn't want to go back. We were scattered. Lucy and I at Mrs. Genevieve's house, Benjamin at a friend's house, the boys with Lucy's godmother. The entire town mobilized to help us, donating clothes, food, offering temporary shelter. But everyone knew that this couldn't last forever. A week after my mother's burial, we were called to a meeting at the town hall. Present were the mayor, Mr. Custodio, Sheriff Richards, Pastor Anderson, and a woman we had never seen before. Mrs. Matthews, a social worker from the state capitol. "Children," the mayor began, uncomfortable, "we're trying to find the best solution for you. Unfortunately, we don't have a family here in Pine Creek that can take in all 5 of you together." My heart tightened. I understood what that meant even before he continued. Mrs. Matthews came from the capital to help find homes for you, he continued, perhaps in different towns. No, Lucy shouted, suddenly standing up. We won't be separated. We're a family. Benjamin, always more contained, was also visibly shaken. Mr. Mayor, please, he begged. We've already lost our mother. Our father, well, he wasn't really a father for a long time. We only have each other now. Mrs. Matthews approached, her expression soft but firm. I understand your pain, she said, but I need to be honest. It's very difficult to find a home for 5 children together. Benjamin, you're already 17, soon you'll be of legal age. Perhaps you can work and, eventually, reunite your siblings. But for now, we need to ensure that everyone has a safe roof and responsible adults to take care of you. It was the saddest day since my mother's burial. The prospect of being separated was like a knife to the chest. After the meeting, the 5 of us hugged, crying in the middle of the street, making desperate promises to meet again someday. And that's how, 2 weeks after losing my mother, I also lost my siblings. Each one went to a different place. Benjamin stayed in Pine Creek, working at the sawmill. Lucy went to Williamsport to live with a family of teachers. The 2 little ones, Gerald and Ivan, went together to Scranton, to the home of a farmer couple who couldn't have children. And me? I was sent farther away. I ended up in Oakfield, in upstate New York, in the house of a great-aunt I barely knew. Aunt Josephine, my maternal grandmother's sister. She was a widow, had no children, and agreed to take me in when she learned of my situation. The trip to Oakfield was a nightmare. It was the first time I had left Pine Creek. Mrs. Matthews accompanied me on the train to Buffalo, where we changed to another train to Oakfield. It was almost 2 days of travel. I couldn't stop crying, thinking of my siblings, my mother, the life I had left behind. Everything will be all right, Margaret, Mrs. Matthews repeated, trying to console me. Your great-aunt is a good person. She will take good care of you. When we finally arrived at the Oakfield station, there was Aunt Josephine waiting for me. She was a lady in her 60s, thin, with gray hair tied in a bun. She wore a simple dark dress and had a rosary wrapped around her wrist. Her face was serious, but not unkind. So this is Margaret, she said, examining me from head to toe. Welcome, girl. I know you're going through difficult times, but here you'll have peace and security. Aunt Josephine said goodbye to Mrs. Matthews and took me to her house, which was a few blocks from the station. It was a modest but well-kept house with a garden in front and a yard in the back. Very different from our wooden house in Pine Creek. This will be your room, she said, showing a small but clean room with a single bed, an old wardrobe, and a small table. You can arrange your things there. The bathroom is at the end of the hall. We have dinner at 6 o'clock sharp. And so began my new life in Oakfield. Aunt Josephine wasn't a warm or affectionate person, but she was fair and respectful. She established clear rules from the beginning. I would go to school, help with household chores, attend church every Sunday, and should be home before dark every day. I don't want to know about loitering or bad company, she warned. I've been through a lot in life to have headaches in my old age. The adaptation was difficult. The new school, the classmates who looked at me as a stranger, the different accent, the customs of the bigger town, everything made me feel displaced. The nights were the worst. Lying in bed, I would think of my siblings scattered, of my mother who was no longer there, and cry silently so as not to disturb Aunt Josephine. The nightmares started in the first week. I dreamed of my father chasing me through the church, of my mother's coffin, of the separation from my siblings. I would wake up screaming, sweating, trembling. Aunt Josephine would come running to see what was happening. It's just a nightmare, girl, she would say, not very good at consoling. Say a Lord's Prayer and go back to sleep. At school, the children found out about my story through the adults who commented in low voices. Soon the whispers began. She's the girl whose father tried to abuse her. She's the orphan who came from Pennsylvania. They say her father is in prison. I isolated myself more and more. I didn't want friendships, didn't participate in games. In the classroom, I sat in the back and only spoke when the teacher insisted a lot. My grades, which had always been good in Pine Creek, plummeted. One day, the principal, Mrs. Eulalia, called me to her office. She was a middle-aged woman, severe, but with kind eyes. "Margaret," she said, indicating a chair for me to sit on, "I'm concerned about you. I know you've been through terrible things, but if you continue like this, you'll lose the school year." I didn't answer, looking fixedly at my hands. "You need to open up a little, girl," she continued. "There are people here who want to help you. Miss Celia said you're intelligent, that you understand the material quickly, but you don't participate, don't do your homework properly." I remained silent. "Look," she sighed, "I'm going to make you a proposal. We have a psychologist who comes to the school once a week, Dr. Nancy. How about talking to her? It might help." I looked up, surprised. I had never heard of a psychologist before. "What is a psychologist?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper. "She's a doctor who helps us understand what we're feeling, to deal with difficult problems," she explained patiently. "It doesn't hurt. There are no injections," she smiled, trying to make me more comfortable. "It's just conversation." Reluctantly, I agreed. The following week, I met Dr. Nancy. She was a young woman with round glasses and a gentle smile. Contrary to what I expected, she didn't ask 1,000 questions about what had happened to me. We just talked about school, about Oakfield, about how I was adapting. In the following weeks, I continued the meetings with Dr. Nancy. Gradually, I began to trust her, to tell more about my life, my fears, my longing for my siblings. "It's normal to feel all this that you're feeling, Margaret," she told me one day. "You've been through very big traumas in a short time. But gradually, you'll learn to live with these memories without them preventing you from moving forward." The months went by. I continued living with Aunt Josephine, going to school, talking with Dr. Nancy. The nightmares became less frequent, although they never completely disappeared. At school, I began to make some friendships, nothing very close, but at least I no longer felt completely alone. What hurt the most was the lack of news from my siblings. Aunt Josephine wasn't in a position to take me to visit them, and contact was limited to rare letters. Benjamin wrote from time to time, telling that he continued at the sawmill, that he was saving money to reunite us someday. Lucy sent only 2 letters in the first year, saying that she was well, but missed us a lot. From the little ones, we had almost no news, only what came through social workers. They were adapted, growing well, beginning to call the couple from Scranton Dad and Mom. And my father? He was sentenced to several years in prison. The trial took place in Williamsport, and I didn't have to attend, thank God. The testimony I gave to Sheriff Richards was enough, along with Pastor Anderson's testimony about what he heard through the church microphone. That's how I spent my adolescence in Oakfield, between Aunt Josephine's house, school, and sessions with Dr. Nancy. A simple life, without great joys, but also without the terrors I experienced on that fatal day in First Baptist Church. The years passed in Oakfield. I was already 16, almost a woman. Physically, I had grown and developed, but inside I still carried the scars of the past. I continued living with Aunt Josephine, who was already over 65 and increasingly rigid in her rules and schedules. At that time, I no longer went to sessions with Dr. Nancy. She had moved to New York City, and the school couldn't get another psychologist to replace her. The emotional wounds, which seemed to be healing, began to open again without that weekly support. It was during this period that the nightmares returned with full force. Night after night, I would wake up screaming, sweating, trembling, reliving that terrible moment in the church. Aunt Josephine, who never had much patience, began to get irritated. "Girl, it's been 4 years. You need to get over this. We can't wake up the whole neighborhood with your screams anymore," she would complain, rubbing her sleepy eyes, standing at the door of my room. But it wasn't just that. I began to have anxiety attacks during the day, too. At school, any loud noise would startle me. If any man came too close to me on the street, I would freeze in fear. I developed a dread of churches. I couldn't even pass in front of one without feeling nauseous and dizzy. My school performance, which had improved a bit with Dr. Nancy's help, plummeted again. The teachers were concerned, but didn't know how to help. Aunt Josephine was called to the school several times. "I don't know what else to do with this girl," she would say to the principal, who was now Mr. Florentine. "I give her a house, food, clean clothes, and she only gives me headaches." At home, the atmosphere was getting increasingly tense. Aunt Josephine, tired and with health problems, had little patience with my crises. I felt like a burden, an intruder. "If I had known it would be like this, I wouldn't have accepted you here," she said one night, after I woke up screaming for the third time in the same week. Those words hit me like a slap. At school, things weren't much better. I had some friends, but no close relationships. No one really knew what I had been through. I had never told the details to anyone besides Dr. Nancy. It was during this time that I met Mr. Edgar, who taught literature in the last year of junior high. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair at the temples and gentle eyes behind his reading glasses. He noticed my isolation and tried to bring me closer to books as a form of escape. "Literature can be a refuge, Margaret," he told me one day after class. "In books, we can find characters who went through difficulties like ours and managed to overcome them." He lent me some books, novels, poetry, short stories. I read all of them avidly, finding there a world where I could forget my own reality for a few hours. For the first time in years, I felt that there was a small light at the end of the tunnel. But then came the incident that changed everything. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was home alone. Aunt Josephine had gone to the doctor in Rochester and would only return on Sunday. I was reading one of the books that Mr. Edgar had lent me when I heard knocks on the door. When I opened it, I came face to face with a man in his 40s, tall, strong, with a thick mustache that immediately reminded me of my father. I took a step back, frightened. "Are you Margaret?" he asked, his voice deep and rough. "Yes," I stammered. "Who are you?" "I'm Joseph Perkins," he introduced himself. "A friend of your brother Benjamin. He asked me to come see you, bring news." My heart raced. News from Benjamin. It had been almost a year since we had received letters from him. "Please, come in," I invited, still wary, but anxious to hear about my brother. Joseph entered, looking around Aunt Josephine's modest living room. He sat on the sofa, occupying almost all the space with his large body. "Your brother is well," he began. "He's working with me now, in construction in Pittsburgh. He sends his regards and says he'll soon be able to come visit you." Tears came to my eyes. So many years without seeing Benjamin. He must be a grown man now, over 21 years old. "And the others?" I asked anxiously. "Do you know anything about Lucy, Gerald, Ivan?" Joseph shook his head negatively. "I only know Benjamin. We've been working together for about 6 months." I talked a bit more with him, asking several questions about my brother. Joseph answered some, but seemed increasingly restless, shifting on the sofa, looking at me in a way that began to bother me. "Are you alone here?" he asked suddenly, interrupting my question about how Benjamin's health was. "My aunt comes back tomorrow," I replied, feeling a shiver run down my spine. Something in his tone put me on alert. I see," he murmured, getting up. He was very tall, and suddenly the room seemed too small. "You've grown, huh? Benjamin showed me a photo of you when you were a child, but now you're already a young lady." He took a step in my direction. I instinctively backed away. "I think it's better for you to leave," I said, my voice trembling. "It's getting late." "Come on, girl," he smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I came from so far to see you. We can talk a bit more." He advanced further, and I continued backing away until I felt the wall behind my back. At that moment, I had a terrible flashback of what happened in the church with my father. The same sensation of being cornered, the same paralyzing fear. Joseph stretched out his hand to touch my face. I closed my eyes, trembling. "You're very pretty," he whispered, his voice changing to a tone that I immediately recognized. the same tone my father used that day. That's when something inside me exploded. Years of fear, of pent-up anger, of powerlessness, everything came to the surface at once. I opened my eyes, and instead of cowering, I pushed Joseph with all the strength I could gather. "No," I screamed, with a voice that didn't even seem like mine. "Never again. Never again will anyone touch me like that." He staggered backward, surprised by my reaction. I took advantage of that moment and ran to the kitchen. I grabbed the first thing I saw, an iron skillet that was on the stove. "Get out of my house," I ordered, holding the skillet like a weapon. "Get out now, or I'll scream so loud that the whole neighborhood will come to see what's happening." Joseph looked at me, astonished. For a moment, I thought he was going to advance, but then he backed off. "Calm down, girl," he said, raising his hands. "You don't need all this. I was just being friendly." "Friendly?" I repeated, my voice trembling with anger. "This is not being friendly. This is disgusting. Get out of here, now!" He took a few more steps back, picked up his hat that he had left on the table, and went to the door. "You're crazy," he muttered before leaving. "Completely crazy." When the door closed behind him, my legs gave way. I fell to the kitchen floor, still holding the skillet, crying convulsively. But for the first time in years, they weren't just tears of fear or sadness. They were also of anger, of indignation, and strangely, of relief. Because for the first time since that day in the church, I had managed to defend myself. I hadn't been paralyzed. I hadn't been saved by someone. I myself had expelled the danger from my life. I spent the rest of that day and the whole night awake with my bedroom door locked, fearing that Joseph might return. But he didn't come back. And gradually, the adrenaline gave way to a strange sensation of strength, of determination. When Aunt Josephine returned on Sunday afternoon, she found a different Margaret. I told her what had happened, without omitting any detail. "My God in heaven!" she exclaimed, making the sign of the cross. "And do you think he was really a friend of your brother?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Maybe yes, maybe no. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that he tried to do the same thing as my father, and I didn't let him." Aunt Josephine looked at me differently that day. I saw something in her eyes that I had never seen before, a mixture of surprise and respect. "You've grown, girl," she said simply. That night, I had a different dream. It wasn't a nightmare with my father or the church. I dreamed of my mother. She was standing in the yard of our house in Pine Creek, under the oak tree, hanging clothes on the line. When she saw me, she smiled and said, "You'll be all right, my daughter. You're strong, as I always wanted you to be." I woke up with tears in my eyes, but it was a different kind of cry. Something had changed inside me. That confrontation with Joseph had been my tipping point, the moment I decided that I would no longer be a victim, that I wouldn't let the past control my future. On Monday, I went to school with a new determination. I sought out Mr. Edgar and told him everything that had happened, not just the incident with Joseph, but my whole story from what happened in Pine Creek. "I want to study," I said, determined. "I want to graduate, have a profession, be independent. I don't want to be afraid anymore. I don't want to depend on others' charity anymore." Mr. Edgar listened to me attentively, and when I finished, smiled. "That's exactly what you should do, Margaret," he said, "and I'll help you." That's how, at 16, after so much suffering, I finally found a path out of the shadows. It wouldn't be easy, I knew. The scars were still there, and they always would be. But now I had something I didn't have before, the certainty that I was capable of fighting for myself. After that confrontation with Joseph, something fundamental changed inside me. It was as if a flame had been lit, a flame of determination that would no longer let anyone put it out. Mr. Edgar became my great ally in this new phase. He wasn't just a teacher, but a mentor who believed in my potential. "Margaret, you have a natural intelligence," he would tell me. "You can't waste that. You need to study, graduate, build a life for yourself." With his help, I began to dedicate myself intensely to my studies. I spent hours in the school library, reading everything I could. Math, English, science. I absorbed knowledge like a sponge. My grades, which were so bad before, began to improve dramatically. Mr. Florentine, the principal, noticed this change. "It's impressive how you've changed, girl," he commented once when he saw me leaving the library with a stack of books. "What happened?" "I discovered that I have strength, Mr. Florentine," I answered simply, "and that I want more from life than just being the traumatized orphan from Pine Creek." Aunt Josephine also noticed the change. The nightmares didn't stop completely, but they became less frequent. I was more willing, more present, helped more around the house. Our relationship, previously so tense, began to improve. "I never thought I would say this," she commented one night as we were having dinner, "but I'm proud of you, Margaret." Those words meant a lot to me. It was the first time someone had said they were proud of me since my mother had passed away. When I turned 17, Mr. Edgar called me for a special conversation. "Margaret, you know you'll graduate from junior high this year," he began. "Have you thought about what you'll do after?" I had thought, yes. I wanted to continue studying, do high school, maybe even college, although that seemed too distant a dream for a poor girl from the countryside. "I want to continue studying, Mr. Edgar," I replied, "but I don't know if it will be possible. Aunt Josephine is already elderly. She doesn't have the means to support me for much longer." "That's what I want to talk about," he said, smiling. "My wife, Mrs. Clara, teaches at St. Mary's Academy in Buffalo. It's a Catholic school, but they have a scholarship program for promising students. I've spoken about you to her, and she believes you have a chance of getting a spot." My heart raced. Buffalo was a bigger city with more opportunities. St. Mary's Academy was known for its excellent education. "But that would mean leaving Oakfield," I said, thinking of Aunt Josephine. "Yes," he confirmed. "You would live in the school dormitory. But you would be building your future, Margaret. And Buffalo isn't so far. You could visit your aunt on holidays." That night I talked with Aunt Josephine about the proposal. To my surprise, she was totally in favor. "Girl, do you think I'm going to live forever?" she said with her usual frankness. "I'm almost 70 years old. I have my health problems. What would become of you if I passed away? You need to have your own path. If you have this opportunity, grab it with both hands." That's how, a few months later, I took the exam for St. Mary's Academy and, to my joy, was approved with a full scholarship. In January 1964, at 18 years old, I moved to Buffalo, leaving behind Aunt Josephine and the life I had built in Oakfield. St. Mary's Academy was imposing, with its old brick building and high windows. The nuns were rigorous, but fair. The routine was intense: classes in the morning, supervised study in the afternoon, extra activities at the end of the day. I loved every minute of it. For the first time, I was in an environment where no one knew my past. No one knew about the tragedy in Pine Creek, about the microphone in the church, about my father in prison. I was just Margaret, the dedicated student from Oakfield with a scholarship. I made friends there: Gloria, Nancy, and Doris, all also scholarship students. On weekends, when we weren't studying, we would explore Buffalo together. It was a beautiful city, with tree-lined streets and a magnificent view of Lake Erie. It was in Buffalo, during the second year of high school, that I received a letter that would change the course of my life again. It was from Benjamin, my older brother, whom I hadn't seen for almost 6 years. "Dear sister," he wrote, "after much searching, I finally discovered your whereabouts through social services. I'm in New York City now, working in construction. I have a good job. I'm a foreman. I managed to locate Lucy, too. She's married, living in Pittsburgh. About the little ones, we only know that they continue with the family in Scranton, but they're well. I really need to see you." "Can we meet?" I cried, reading that letter. My brother, whom I thought I had lost forever, was alive, well, and wanted to see me. I replied immediately, saying yes, that I very much wanted to meet him. We arranged that he would come to Buffalo the following month, during a holiday. The meeting with Benjamin was emotional. He was so different, a grown man of 23, tall, strong, with the same gentle smile as our mother. We talked for hours on a bench in Buffalo's Central Park. He told me about his life, about how he had struggled to survive after we were separated, about the jobs he had until he reached New York City. "And that man, Joseph, who came to visit me in Oakfield?" I asked, remembering the incident that had changed my life. "He said he worked with you." Benjamin frowned, confused. "Joseph, I never worked with anyone by that name," he replied. "And I never sent anyone to visit you, Margaret. I didn't even know where you were until recently." A chill ran down my spine. So Joseph had lied. He probably didn't even know Benjamin. He was just a predator who somehow had discovered information about me and invented that story to get close. "What is it, Margaret? You're pale," Benjamin asked, concerned. I told him what had happened, Joseph's visit, his attempts, how I had confronted him. Benjamin was furious. "If I get my hands on that bastard," he muttered, his fists clenched. "It's all right, Benjamin," I assured him. "It's over." Actually, that incident made me stronger. It was when I decided I wouldn't be a victim anymore. Benjamin looked at me with admiration. "You're amazing, you know? Our mother would be so proud." Before saying goodbye, he made me a proposal that would change the course of my life once more. "Margaret, when you finish high school, come to New York City. I'm established there. I have a small but comfortable apartment. You can live with me, try to get into a college. That was always your dream, wasn't it?" That proposal lit a new hope in my heart. New York City, the big metropolis, studying at a real university. And most importantly, being close to my brother again. "I'll think about it, Benjamin," I promised, hugging him tightly in farewell. "I'll think about it carefully." And I did think about it. During the last year of high school, I dedicated myself even more to my studies, determined to pass the college entrance exams. Aunt Josephine, whom I visited regularly, supported my decision. "Go, girl, build your life. There's nothing more for you here," she would say, increasingly fragile with advanced age. In December 1966, I graduated from St. Mary's Academy with honors. The nuns encouraged me to continue my studies, and the Mother Superior even helped me with the forms for New York University. "You have the potential to go far, Margaret," she told me. "Don't waste this gift that God has given you." In January 1967, at 21 years old, I moved to New York City, to Benjamin's apartment in the East Village. It was a modest place, but clean and welcoming. My brother had become a responsible and hard-working man, respected in the construction company where he was a foreman. In February, I took the entrance exam for the literature course at NYU. The competition was enormous, and I, a girl from the countryside, was competing with students from renowned schools in the city. But all my dedication during the years at St. Mary's Academy paid off. I was accepted. The happiness I felt upon seeing my name on the list of accepted students is indescribable. I, Margaret Sullivan, daughter of a laundress and a sawmill worker, orphaned at 12, was entering one of the most prestigious universities in the country. Benjamin hugged me tightly when I gave him the news. "See? You did it," he said, his eyes moist. "You went through all that, and look where you've arrived. That's what being strong is, little sister." That's how, after so much suffering, life finally began to smile at me. The path had been long and painful, from that terrible day in First Baptist Church to the classroom at NYU. But I had survived. More than that, I had transformed myself. That frightened girl from Pine Creek was becoming a strong, determined woman with a future ahead of her. And it all began when I decided that I would no longer be a victim, that I would take control of my own story. And so, my dears, the years went by. I graduated in literature from NYU in 1970 at 24 years old. It was one of the happiest days of my life. Benjamin was there at the graduation, proud as if he were my father. Aunt Josephine, already 75 years old, couldn't attend because of her fragile health, but she sent an emotional telegram of congratulations. Soon, I got a job as a teacher at a public school in the Bronx. I loved teaching, seeing the students' eyes shining when they understood something new. I had a special patience with the quieter ones, the shy ones, those who, like me once, carried invisible wounds. It was at that school that I met Harold Taylor, the math teacher. He was gentle, respectful, soft-spoken, and with delicate gestures. Gradually, we grew closer. "You speak of the countryside with such fondness," he told me one day as we were having lunch in the teacher's lounge. "Do you miss it?" "Some things," I replied. "The clean air, the starry sky, the more tranquil rhythm of life." "I'm from the countryside too," he shared. "From upstate. My parents still live there." Our friendship grew, and in 1972, to my surprise, he asked me to be his girlfriend. I hesitated at first. The ghost of my past still haunted me. "I need to tell you some things about me, Harold," I said, determined to be honest. "About my past, about what happened to me." And I told him everything. About my mother's death, about my father, about the microphone in the church, about the years of separation from my siblings, about Joseph and how that had transformed me. He listened to me in silence, holding my hand. "Margaret," he said when I finished, "you are the strongest person I've ever met. And I love you exactly as you are, with everything you've lived through, with all your scars." We got married in 1973, in a simple ceremony with few guests. Benjamin was my best man. Lucy came from Pittsburgh with her husband and 2 small children. Even Gerald, already 24 years old, managed to come. It was our first reunion after so many years. Only Ivan couldn't attend. He was working on a merchant ship, sailing around the world. We bought a small house in Yonkers, and there we built our life together. In 1975, our first daughter was born, Eleanor, in honor of my mother. 3 years later came Mark. The family I had lost so early was being rebuilt. I continued teaching, now at a school closer to home. Harold became the principal of a public school. Life followed its tranquil course, with the normal joys and challenges of any family. In 1985, Aunt Josephine passed away, at 87 years old. I went to the funeral in Oakfield, and despite the sadness, I felt a great gratitude for that woman who, in her own way, had taken me in when I most needed it. She left me her house as inheritance, the same house where I had lived my adolescence. "What are we going to do with the house?" Harold asked when we returned to Yonkers. "For now, nothing," I replied. "Let's keep it. Who knows, maybe someday." And that day came sooner than we had imagined. In 1990, Harold suffered a heart attack. It wasn't fatal, thank God, but the doctors recommended a quieter life away from the stress of the city. "What if we moved to Oakfield?" I suggested. "Aunt Josephine's house is there. The air is cleaner. Life is calmer." That's how, at 44 years old, I returned to Oakfield, no longer as the traumatized girl, but as an accomplished woman, with a husband, children, and a career. I got a transfer to a local school, and Harold, after fully recovering, began giving private math lessons at home. Our children, already teenagers, adapted well to life in the small town. The years went by. The children grew up, graduated, left home. Eleanor became a doctor and went to live in Rochester. Mark followed in his father's footsteps and became a math teacher, but in Albany. In 2001, I retired after 30 years of teaching. It was a tranquil transition. I continued giving private English lessons to students in town and began dedicating myself more to cooking, especially the desserts I learned from my mother back in Pine Creek. Life was serene until, in 2013, Harold left us, victim of a second heart attack, more severe. It was 40 years of a happy marriage, of true companionship. The pain was immense, but the years had taught me to deal with losses. And here I am today, at 79 years old, living in this same house that once belonged to Aunt Josephine, now transformed by time and the renovations we made over the years. My children visit me whenever they can, bringing my 5 grandchildren, Tyler and Claire, Eleanor's children, and Louis, Mary, and Philip, Mark's children. My day-to-day is tranquil. I wake up early, as I've always done. I take care of my plants in the garden, bake my desserts to order, receive visits from former students who still call me Mrs. Taylor. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I go to the senior center, where I participate in a knitting and crochet group. The nightmares that tormented me so much in my youth are now rare. The scars are still there, but they don't hurt as before. I've learned to live with my past without letting it define my present. Of all my siblings, only Benjamin and Lucy are still alive. We talk on the phone regularly and meet at family gatherings. Gerald passed away in 2010 from cancer. Ivan, the youngest, disappeared on a sea voyage in 1998. We never knew exactly what happened. As for my father, I heard that he died in prison in 1970 without ever having attempted to contact us. I felt neither anger nor forgiveness, just a distant indifference, as if he were a character from a story I read a long time ago. Life has taught me that we are much stronger than we imagine, that the worst storms pass, and that it is always possible to rebuild, to begin again, to find joy, even after the deepest pain. My dear ones who are listening to me, I've reached this point, at 79 years old, carrying with me the scars of the past, but also the strength I found to overcome each obstacle. And if there's one thing I've learned on this long journey, it's that our story doesn't have to define us forever. If you're going through a difficult time, an abuse, a situation that seems to have no way out, I want to tell you, from my heart, you are not alone. And more importantly, you are stronger than you imagine. Inside you, there is a strength that perhaps you don't know yet, a strength that only appears when it's really necessary. I learned that age doesn't define our strength, but rather our capacity to begin again each day. How many times did I have to start over? When I lost my mother, when I was separated from my siblings, when I arrived alone in a strange town, when I confronted that man in Aunt Josephine's house. Each new beginning made me stronger. My wrinkles are maps of survival. Each one tells a story of pain overcome. I look in the mirror today and I see not just an elderly lady, but a warrior who didn't let herself be defeated, who didn't allow the evil they tried to do to her to become greater than her capacity to love and live. Life taught me that even in the deepest darkness, our inner light never goes out. In the darkest moments, when I thought there was no way out, a small light always appeared. A teacher who believed in me, a brother who found me after years, good people who crossed my path. I never allowed my dignity to be stolen, even when they tried to take everything from me. That day in the church, when my own father tried to do the unthinkable, could have completely destroyed me. But something inside me resisted, survived, and then grew, strengthened. I discovered that we are stronger than we imagine, especially when we think we can't take it anymore. In the moments when I thought I was going to give up, when the pain was too great, I found strengths I didn't know I had. Time doesn't heal all wounds, but it teaches us to live with them and still smile. The marks of my past never completely disappeared. The nightmares, even rare now, still come sometimes. But I learned to live with these scars without them controlling my ability to be happy. My story isn't about what they did to me, but about how I chose to respond. I could have sunk into bitterness, resentment, hatred. But I chose another path, the path of study, work, love. I built a family, a career, a life worth living. I learned that true strength isn't in never falling, but in getting up every time. How many times did I fall? How many times did I cry thinking I couldn't go on? But always I found a way to get up, to take one more step, even when it seemed impossible. Abuse leaves invisible scars, but recovery shows that we can flourish even after the storm. Like a devastated garden that with time and care blooms again, we too can be reborn from our pains. I discovered that my voice, even trembling, has power when I decide to use it. When I finally had the courage to speak, to denounce, to defend myself, I discovered that my voice was stronger than I imagined. Age has given me the wisdom to understand that it's never too late to start over. At 44, I returned to Oakfield and rebuilt my life once more. At 67, when I lost my husband, I had to learn to live alone again. Each restart is difficult, but possible. My experience has taught me that our story doesn't end with the painful chapters. What happened in that church so many years ago wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a journey of overcoming. I learned that surviving is a form of resistance and living well is the best revenge. Each day that I live with joy, each moment I spend with my grandchildren, each dessert I make with love, is a victory over those who tried to destroy me. And now, my dear listeners, I need to make a special request. If you know someone who is going through a situation of abuse, don't be silent. Don't look away. In any country, in any culture, there are authorities and organizations ready to help. Seek information about protection in your region. Dignity and respect are universal values, no matter where you are. Sometimes, a word of support, an attentive ear, a gesture of solidarity can save a life. I was saved by a microphone that was left on, but many people don't have that luck. They need someone to notice their silent signals for help, to extend a hand when they don't have the strength to ask for help. My beloved ones who are watching me now, please subscribe to this channel and turn on the notifications immediately. Each subscription is like a hand extended to someone who is suffering in silence, because these videos need to reach those who need to hear that it's possible to overcome the worst pains. If you know someone who may be suffering abuse, share this video right now, because a story like mine might be the light that person needs to find courage and seek help. Leave in the comments if you've ever witnessed or know someone who went through a situation of abuse and how that person managed to overcome it. Do it now. Don't wait another minute, because while we're talking, someone might be desperately needing this message of hope. Have a great day, everyone. I love you all. By the way, if you've stayed until here, you're part of less than 2% of the viewers on this channel, so for me to know who's still here, comment below the word love.